Hey, remember when Superman fought the Incredible Hulk? Or when Batman teamed up with Daredevil and Spider-Man to take down crime? Well, DC and Marvel just announced they are reprinting their classic crossover collections into two oversized hardcovers. Now, the DC vs. Marvel Omnibus and DC vs. Marvel The Amalgam Age are both available for pre-order right now at Organic Price Books. So if you want to learn about Dark Claw or the original Spider-Boy, go ahead and place your pre-order. You'll get over 30% off and you'll save $2 every time with code BJKicks at checkout. Just visit comicsaredope.com/crossover. That's comicsaredope.com/crossover. All right, guys. So my next guest is an acclaimed writer of tons of comics, right? I first heard of him through his creator-owned work called Princeless, but you may know him from Rainbow Bright or even My Little Pony, or from his latest work available now, The Cold Ever After. But please welcome Mr. Jeremy Whitley to the show. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's no problem at all, man. I'm super excited for this conversation. This one was connected by the good folks over at Hive Comicade. Brandon reached out and was like, "Hey, we've got a writer who just released a new graphic novel. You should check it out and maybe have him on your show." And I was like, "I've heard of this guy." And so I'm looking at your website and I'm like, Princeless. I remember Princeless because this was years ago at this point. I'm at Ultimate Comics Rally, my LCS, and Dan, the owner, recommended Princeless. He was just going through a bunch of YA stuff for my daughter at the time. And I think I ultimately was like, okay, this is a little bit advanced for her now, but I'll check it out later because the premise just sounds amazing. And then I realized I never checked it out. And so it's funny because you sent like this just trove of comics work that you've done. And I was supposed to be reading all of it or at least skimming through most of it, right? And
There's a lot there.
right, but I didn't. I ended up just staying in Princeless. I loved that book. Um, but I guess tell me a little bit about how you got started. I guess we can go with comic book origin stories just as a fan.
Yeah, so I've always been in comics and nerd stuff. My dad is a big nerd. He's a big J.R.R. Tolkien guy. He introduced
Mm,
me to Lord of the Rings as a small child. So like that and comics, he was always into Spider-Man and all that. So like we had a little local comic shop where I grew up a little bit in the Bay Area called Fact Fiction Fantasy. Um, and it just so happened, I think probably my biggest sort of origin with wanting to get into doing comics is I had written some stuff that was basically theoretically a picture book, but I had made it a comic in
mm,
as like a second grader. And Stan Lee came and did a signing at the shop, and like everybody else is bringing their copies of old expensive Spider-Man issues for him to sign, and I'm just like, here is my copy of an X-Men book I wrote for you to look at. And he gave me the whole like keep writing Excelsior, Stan Lee thing. The thing you want is a person meeting Stan Lee. um I think as a kid I was like, all right, I can do it. Stan Lee says I can do it, so like I must be able to. So like I was always into writing, and then I graduated college, and I think a lot of like creative writing programs in college sort of like try to drub all of the like fun out of writing for
mm,
you. They don't want you to do anything that's genre specific. They don't want any fantasy or sci-fi or fun stuff. Um, and I got through that, and I was working at the local Blockbuster, which was around the corner from uh, Ultimate Comics in Chapel Hill, which does not exist anymore, but used to be um, down there by
mm.
where the Blockbuster used to be. Both of neither of them there anymore. I don't even think the
Correct.
building is there anymore. Um, but it just so happened that John was one of the guys working there at the time. Would come in every day and rent movies to watch while he was working at the shop, and
Mm,
recommended. We got to talking at one point about uh, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because that's like my wife's favorite show. It's like her favorite thing.
mm,
And they had just launched the new sort of like Dark Horse series that they were doing with that. And He was like, "Yeah, you should come check it out. Get her some copies." And I think like I got in there and I was like, "Oh yeah, I love comics." Like
Mm,
I picked up X-Men stuff. I think in that same, but those within those same couple of trips, like I read those Buffy books and I was like, this guy who wrote this story about Faith, this guy Brian K. Vaughan, like I really like his writing. What else has he done?
mm.
So pretty soon I'm bringing home like piles of Why the Last Man, and back on reading X-Men and everything. And I think that just sort of lit a fire under me to start writing comics and like start working with friends of mine who were illustrators to actually like do it.
Got you. And so, you've always been into writing, you've always been into comics, but it sounds like you've always been into fantasy specifically as well. Where did that love come from, and maybe what were some of the things that got you hooked?
I grew up like not just reading Tolkien, but also like playing D&D, and like
Mm,
I had a family where like that was I know a lot of families in the 80s that were really like told to be freaked out about D&D, but like my parents were nerdy enough that like they got into it, and
mm,
as a kid we would play with the family, and like it was a thing that it was either that or Magic the Gathering or all this stuff, and I always had uh fantasy stuff to read, and I just felt like there was this long gap in sort of the early 2000s, where there just wasn't like fantasy stuff coming
mm,
out for a long time. And leading into doing Princeless, like I think the only other fantasy book that had come out in like the last 5 years that I can remember is Skull Kickers,
mm,
Jim Zub's book. And so like it was just one of those things where I was like, I want to do fantasy stories, and for some reason, like they're just not doing those in comics right now. So, we ended up pitching Princeless. I did a first version of it with an artist who's a friend of mine who ended up deciding that he didn't want to do comics after spending, the amount of time it takes to draw one issue.
mm.
Um, and then eventually getting hooked up with some new artists and who were really excited about it. And I think our first issue came out the same week that the new 52 started.
Oh wow.
So yeah, we took a drubbing and like I think sold 700 copies of the first issue, but we got a couple of nice reviews, and then um, really like got nominated for a couple of Eisner Awards, and I think that really like caught people's attention.
Mm.
Um, and Princeless fortunately ended up having a very long tail of people who didn't know anything about it going in or hadn't heard about it, and sort of discovered it 5 or 6 volumes in.
Mm. It was really cool. I was actually I went to Atomic Empire today. I just happened to be in Durham, so I walk in and they actually have a copy of Princeless, that hardcover volume 1. And I was like, oh snap. That's crazy. Like I'm talking to Jeremy tonight. But it's really well done. So for anyone who hasn't read Princeless or hasn't heard of it, right? It's basically the book starts off with this like someone's reading a bedtime story basically about the princess in the castle, and basically we kind of snap back to reality, and the girl who's being read the story is also a princess, and she's just like, this is super unrealistic, like why would anyone do this, what are all these plot holes, just all this stuff, right? And we clearly get the sense that this princess is not your typical like damsel in distress type princess. Um, and she's like, yeah, I'm never going to be trapped in a castle waiting for some dude to save me. And basically, her parents, who are kind of played as evil in the book, but her parents basically trick her into being trapped in a castle, right? And the whole idea is for her to be rescued so that there can be a new king. Like the king can have somebody to pass his stuff on to, because he also views his son as just being like too weak or effeminate, or what have you. So just immediately in the first volume, it's like we've got Adrian, who I love, right? And then I'm blanking on her brother's name,
Devin.
Devin, but I'm also just loving Devin's character arc, like sort of finding his own form of masculinity with like the overbearing dad, right? And I mean, I feel like we've all kind of seen that sort of trope, whether it's the sports dad or whatever it might be. But I just love how we immediately run out the gate and like, okay, this is our protagonist, this is our hero, and then we've got our side character. And what I love about Adrian is like she's not like the smart girl trope in that it's like girls just have to be smart because they're girls and boys are dumb and like they drool or whatever. But it's like she's just a super strong feminine character who is like, no, I'm not waiting around for somebody to save me. In fact, I'm going to save all of my sisters from the towers that they're locked in as well. And I'm going to do it my way. And I don't know, not to spoil the whole book. I can't because I haven't read the whole book, but I just really fell in love with just this story. And now here I am, the grown man. Like, I'm going to read all of Princeless.
Yeah, it's been incredibly fun to write because I think the nice thing about Adrian that I sort of stumbled into of her as a character is like she is sort of straight ahead. Her thing is like, I'm gonna do it my way, I'm gonna figure it out. And her way is almost always running head first into the thing. Like even if that's not the intelligent way to do it, she, doesn't really care to plan a lot of the time. She doesn't want to like sit back and wait for things to happen. She's going to go ahead and do it. I would even argue in some cases she's not particularly smart. She is, hard headed and strong willed, and she's surrounds herself with eventually with people who are some of those other things and who look out for her and care for her. But yeah, I think like I didn't want to make a character who necessarily is getting by being hyper intelligent. I mean, I don't have anything against that. I've written a lot of really smart characters, but like with Adrian, it's like that's just not her thing. She's going to jump into things head first, and Devin is sort of the other way around. Like, you're used to having that sort of tradition of like male warrior characters who charge in and do things, and he's going to like figure things out. He's going to talk to people first and figure out what the deal is and find a way, try and find a more peaceful way to go about things. And very much the opposite way of Adrian. And I think it's one of those, it was an interesting thing for me because I really started writing Adrian first, sort of like modeled after some of the women in my own family, including, my sister-in-law, who is named Adrian. She's named after. But like, with Devin, I think like that came to be a thing for me where I didn't really know that I was going to have this sort of parallel story in it as I had started. And it just made sense to me because, I've always been the sort of guy who like, I am a big guy, I am fairly strong, but I'm not an aggressive person by nature,
Yeah.
And I think there have been, there's always people throughout your life when you're like that mistake that for being weak. And having a character who is sort of the opposite of that warrior stereotype, who is having to find his own way through his own trials. Because Adrian has a hard time because people want her to be this certain way that princesses are supposed to be. But I think a lot of guys sort of get overlooked in that like they are being forced to be this way that guys are supposed to be too, and that's not the way a lot of guys are.
Right. So, kind of sitting down to write Princeless, because I guess as a reader, it's you the reason you read a book might be different from the reason you write one, right? Like when I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh snap! First, right off the bat, it's a book with a black girl on the cover, right? And then it's like we're turning some of these tropes on their head, like we're poking fun at superhero costumes, or at least the women's costumes. But there's a lot of sort of decisions, right, made right up front. And I think I'm always curious, especially with like an indie creator who is starting out as an indie creator, right? Like, what is the statement that you're looking to make? Or is it that you're looking to make a pointed statement, or is it just I just want to make a comic and this is what appeals to me?
Um, I think at the very beginning with Princeless, it was a lot of like, um, my wife is black.
Mm,
My daughters are black, of course. So it was like she had grown up reading comics in the 80s, and there'd been a time where like there was some amount of like stuff that girls could read.
mm,
Um, and I feel like, especially throughout the 90s and the early 2000s, there was a like push for comics to grow up. And by grow
mm,
up, they meant like be for 50-year-old men.
right.
So, it got it got very hostile towards women and children. There was a long period, I think, of especially in the 2000s where everything was sort of pushed to that like ultimate universe brink where it's like
Mm,
the superheroes say bad words now. And, so I feel like comics are supposed to be for everybody and especially for kids. And I
mm,
wanted to be able to share that with my daughters as they were growing up and for them to see themselves in comics and get excited about it. And I think it occurred to me like talking to my sisters-in-law and nieces and stuff that like those getting to those kids who like hadn't grown up with comics, whose parents hadn't grown up with comics, who didn't know about it, like you have to kind of meet them where they're at.
mm,
So telling a story that was about a princess that had, uh, our character in the original like had the cover was bright pink,
mm,
and that it is a story about a princess and it has some of those aesthetics and it has that fantasy stuff. Um, and then just sort of like sneaking in the sort of messages that I wanted my girls to learn, in through the back door as I'm telling this like fun princess adventure story,
mm.
seemed like the way to go about it. Um, and then it just sort of it kept getting bigger and bigger as we were going. We ended up with all these sisters and sort of expanding out the story we wanted to tell, not into just Princeless, but then we had our spin-off Raven the Pirate Princess, which is deals a lot more with sort of queer characters and issues, and there's a little more of like a YA soap opera
Mm,
story, but sort of like I I think it's funny to think that like we model so much of what like is great about comics after guys like Jack Kirby. And like Kirby got his start drawing romance comics. Like he drew a
mm,
lot of romance comics, and that we like just sort of threw that aside at some point and decided that like those weren't worth comics paying attention to. Uh, it sucks. And I think we've seen it sort of growing back and there being a larger market for different types of comics in the US. And it's been interesting to see, having been sort of on the tip of that a little bit of
mm,
this book having been very unusual when it was coming out, and
mm.
now it being a book that gets like referenced as, oh, this new book is kind of like Princeless and this and the other. um it's been fascinating, and yeah, like I wanted to have something that we could share. And I think now you look at you know the comics that are selling the most, and we sell a ton more of like graphic novels to kids and teens than we do single issues of comics these days.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, I mean, the sales reports are showing it. Like these graphic novels, like even the stuff that got my daughter into comics, like the Raina Telgemeier stuff, like just all of it it's making a huge boom right now. Like it's big. How I'm curious, how did your girls respond to Princeless?
It's been interesting because I think they've sort of both discovered it as they were growing up, because
Mm,
the first volume of Princess was coming out as my oldest daughter was not even born yet. We
mm,
were just sort of getting pregnant as that stuff was coming out. Um, so I read some of it to them, and then sort of like they've I've kind of let them discover it themselves rather than pushing it on them. And my younger daughter, who is 7 now, sort of like at one point was reading Princeless and came down to like tell me about it. She
mm.
was like, "Oh, this book is great." I was like, "Yeah, who wrote it? Look at the front." Um, and yeah, she's super excited, about that, and just blown through a bunch of volumes of it. Yeah, it's not as popular among her friend group is the My Little Pony stuff I've written, but
Mhm.
I'll take second place to My Little Pony, you know.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's funny. My daughter went through all that stuff. She had My Little Pony. Like I said, all the Raina Telgemeier stuff. I just gifted all of her Dogman books to one of the families from my church because it was like, all right, these aren't getting read anymore. They're just sitting there taking up space. And then I went and bought the latest Dogman, like just out of habit. Like I don't know why I have it. Like, because my 13-year-old's not gonna read it. Um, I keep telling myself I'm going to read it before I give it away. But anyway, I think I don't know. I, like you were saying earlier, like comics should be for everyone, but I'm always surprised at how few comics there are for kids, right? And maybe it's just the direct market doesn't cater to kids as much, which makes sense because it's specialty stuff. Um, but I don't know, there's something about like when I see a comic that I know I can read with my kids just by looking at the cover, like I just get all giddy. Um, what keeps you writing YA stories?
Um, I think, those are, in a lot of ways, I feel like those are the stories that have the most impact. They have the most potential to like really stick with people.
Mhm.
Um, and I like to tell people like it's funny to sit next to guys that are like old pros who've been working to DC and Marvel for decades at cons, and they'll have a lot more people come to their table, but there's people all have like just a stack of books they want signed. They don't really want to talk to the person, or they have a real question about like why Flash's lightning bolt is going this direction on his shoe in issue 147 of whatever, and they'll like watch me having these like interactions with kids who were just psyched to be there and meet me and
Mm,
talk about the comics. And it's like it's funny because like these guys will get jealous of me and I'm
right.
like, I mean, I wish I had your guys' career, but like it is great to like be at a convention and get those kind of like fans that are kids who are just psyched out of their mind to like talk to you about your comic.
Yeah.
um the number of times that I've been like interviewed by 7-year olds at conventions is amazing. So like I love doing that kind of stuff, and I feel like just between the 90s and 2000s and even now, there are so many adult books that unless I feel like I have something I really want to say, um, the story I really want to tell, uh, it's much more fun in a lot of ways to write the YA and middle grade stuff, and to like you know put stuff out there that I feel like has a potential to make a difference. Even when I do stuff that is older, I try to like make it stuff like Unstoppable Wasp or the Gwenpool story I did for Marvel that has like a potential for people to feel like seen in reading it, and for it to really connect. And I like feeling like I'm writing somebody's new favorite story.
Mm, right. No, for sure. Um, it's funny you talking about like just how kids treat comics pros like superstars, right? Like I met Rico Renzi last year at NC Comic Con, and I brought my daughter with me, and Rico just decides to come up to me like, "Oh, are you BJ Kicks?" Right, just to kind of like freak my daughter out. And my daughter's like, "Oh my God, he knows you!" Like, and so, but you would have thought like she was meeting Justin Bieber or something. Like, just she was so enamored. And then he sketched Spider Gwen on a coaster for her, and she still has it in her room. Like, there's just something about the impressions that you make as a kid. I was just listening to somebody who was talking about that, like why don't comics market to kids more? Because it theoretically it's easier to market to kids, right? Like they're easier to excite in a lot of ways. But I don't know. For whatever reason, I feel like kids are forgotten. So I'm excited that people like you are making books like you're making.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of direct market guys spend a lot of time and energy like figuring out how to sell 100 more of this single issue to comic book shops by making another variant cover of this thing that they can advertise. And they've invested, I feel like, a lot of time and money in that that ship. And it's a, when you're talking about Marvel or DC, it takes a lot of time to turn a ship that's that size.
Yeah.
Because they've got all the right artillery, all the right pieces you need to run the way they're running. And if they're going to change that game plan, it's a much bigger step to do. And I think you've seen, especially with DC, they've done a lot more of the YA graphic novels and stuff like that, and seen interest from that. And I think they just aren't sure how or where to market it, and how to fit it in with the rest of what they do. Because I think we saw that with Wasp when I was doing that, because we did the first volume and it got canceled, and then it came back because enough people were just like excited about that book, and it sold enough copies and trades later on that people were like, actually, let's do more of this, and sell more copies of it.
Man. So making the leap from your creator-owned work to doing, whether it was licensed stuff or even like Big Two stuff, how did that happen?
I think the first real opportunity I had was with My Little Pony. I had I met a friend. I met Tony Fleece, who was working on the My Little Pony comics at Denver Comic Con several years ago, and he had a friend who was a big fan of Princeless and told him all about it. And the My Little Pony comics had just sort of kicked off and were doing huge numbers. People were incredibly interested in them. And he was like, we're doing more sort of miniseries and one-off stuff. Do you know anything about My Little Pony? Would you be interested in writing it? And I was like, at that point, I had been like doing stay-at-home dad stuff with my older daughter. So at like the age of 3, I had gotten just so sick of Dora the Explorer that like we were just, because if you get kids like and you've dealt with preschool programming, especially Dora the Explorer, it's got like the same 4 beats in every episode. There's the same song about that stupid map every episode. And it just like, it starts to get mind numbing, and you're like, let's find something different. And she hit on, My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. And it was so funny. And like the characters were so good. It was such a like well-made kids show that I was like, you like this? Let's stick with this. Let's forget Dora for a while, and we'll watch ponies. And so I had seen all of it at that point. And he was like, yeah, would you have some ideas of what you want to pitch? I'll put you in touch with the editor. And I got in touch with Bobby Curnow, who was the editor at that point. And I sent him like 5 or 6 pitches, and there were 2 of them. And he was like, these both sound like great issues. Go ahead and write them out for me. And, they ended up being issues 2 and 7 of My Little Pony Friends Forever. And then now, I guess it's like 10 years later at this point, I've written like 60 issues of My Little Pony comics.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So do you remember those 2 pitches, or at least one of them?
Yeah, the first one I wrote, which was Friends Forever #2, was I was like, I want to write a story with Discord because he's so much fun. He's got that John Delancey voice that I know very well as Q, and has the same sort of feeling as Q. And I was like, well, what is terrifying to an all-powerful chaos god? Like, what is something that can match him? And I was like, well, we'll throw him in a story with the Cutie Mark Crusaders. It doesn't matter how much of an all-powerful god he is. Like, having 3 small children just like glom onto you is enough to take anybody down.
Right.
So he decides that he's going to play a trick on them by helping them get their cutie marks, but he's going to put them through all these crazy scenarios, and after a while he starts going a bit insane, and they have to like have a moment of coming together, and him realizing that he has something in common with these kids, and then connecting that way. So that was the first like pitch I threw at them, and that ended up being a big like. The fun thing with Discord is because he can manipulate reality, it can do anything. I can make references to all sorts of stuff. So we put like a reference to Star Trek: The Next Generation in there, and we had like Discord wearing the full like Q outfit and everything. So it was a lot of fun, and yeah, led to me writing a whole bunch more of those, and then eventually like that sort of springboarded into doing more stuff for like Marvel and people like that.
Nice, nice. You know, my 3-year-old right now is Daniel Tiger. It's Daniel Tiger or Peppa Pig. I think I don't know. It depends on the day. Today Peppa Pig won, and I was like, hey, I'm cool with this. I think
Peppa
Daniel
Pig's a little
Tiger.
more clever. Daniel
Yeah,
Tiger has that like preschool 3 or 4 beats.
yeah. It's the beats. It's in the songs, right? Like all
Yeah,
of that. It's like those get old quickly.
I as soon as you said that, it started playing in my head. The "Won't you ride along with me?
Right
Ride
along.
along." Yeah, it's
It's
trauma.
yeah, that's what it is. It's that. And then even the song about being mad, it's like, uh, it makes you mad singing the song. But
Yeah,
but yeah, no, I think yeah, we'll have to try out My Little Pony. Um, I do think there's something about like that preschool programming that does just kind of keep their attention, but it's also like I don't know, like I don't know, I don't like you making my kid a zombie. It's weird. Um, but it's helpful when they recall things like counting to 4 when they're mad. I don't know.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's one of those things that like they have it down to a science, right? Like
mhm,
they know what it's what a preschool program should look like. They have 22 minutes mapped out exactly every time.
right.
Doc McStuffins is the same way,
Mhm,
where it's like, here's the problem, here's the complication, here's the solution, here's the everybody, singing at the end. Everything's great.
right. Man, Doc McStuffins, that's a throwback. My oldest, that was her jam. Doc McStuffins. But she was Doc McStuffins for her 5th birthday party. Um, and one of the kids, like, I don't know, somebody brought like their 2-year-old, and the 2-year-old comes up to my daughter, was like, "Hey, Doc," like she thought she was real. I'm like, that's magical there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, my oldest went as Doc McStuffins for Halloween one year, so the whole
nice.
outfit.
So you've got a lot of like these sort of books under your belt. You've got Rainbow Bright and My Little Pony. Um, I mean, even Princeless, right? Like we can kind of draw a line, or we kind of find these themes, right? It's these young, powerful female characters. Speaking of powerful females, you wrote a Powerpuff Girls comic in which they cross over with Dexter's Lab. How fun was that?
That's a lot of fun. Like getting to get in there and play with all the various toys is a lot of fun. It's a little more like they keep you on a little tighter leash than when you're doing your own thing.
Mhm.
Um, it's sort of the price of playing with the toys, but it's a fun thing to get to do. Um, Especially like when you get to play with a character that you're like, oh, I know what this character's voice is like. I know this guy.
Right.
Um, the first time I wrote Spider-Man in like an Avengers story, I was like, oh, Peter Parker. I know exactly what Peter Parker sounds like. All right, this is easy. I don't have
Right.
to think about it.
That is cool. Uh, um, Dynamite, who published Rainbow Bright, just got the Warner Brothers license, so they just announced their new Powerpuff Girls series. Got my fingers crossed for Dexter's Lab. Is there um, a licensed character that you haven't worked on that you would love to work on?
Um, hmm. There's a I get excited about every job that I get. So I
Mm,
think like there's a lot of there's a lot of licensed characters I'd like to dig into, a lot of like superheroes and stuff that I haven't gotten to play with that I would love to do. Um, I'm a big sucker for like I really like the Avatar world, the
mm,
Last Airbender and Korra, that stuff. I would love to write some stuff in that world, not necessarily those characters, but I just love like the whole world that they've built there and
yeah,
the all the history that they pack into it. It's so much fun. But yeah, I think like those guys and then like the X-Men are my those are my dream projects for licensed stuff.
got you. Um, and I guess we keep jumping back into the YA stuff, but I'm curious, like. And maybe it's easier for you because you have daughters, but what are the challenges to writing for a younger audience, or I guess especially as you get older? How do you keep that sort of youthful sensibility?
Um, I think to some extent it's easier when you're writing stuff like fantasy because you don't have to make everybody seem super modern.
Mm,
They just have to feel like they have to have strong enough like character that they still feel like themselves, which I think is one of the sort of the brilliant things of My Little Pony is everybody has sort of a one thing that this character is honest, this character is funny, so everybody has their own thing, and the voices. But I think the trickiest thing is when you start to get to like modern stuff, trying to make all the comedy feel timeless to some extent.
mm,
Um, because you don't want to be a victim of not to shade DreamWorks, but I feel like DreamWorks falls into this trap of like stuff that is super modern and super current at the time, and then 5 years later, you go back and you look at the Emoji Movie or jokes that they have in Aunt Z or stuff
mm.
like that. That you're like, oh God, that is very 2001. Like you
Right,
can carbon date the jokes.
right.
Um, and you don't want it to feel like that. You want my hope is with Princeless that somebody who's a kid who's 5 years old and picking it up now will have roughly the same experience that the kid who picked it up 10 years ago did.
Mm. And so yeah, it's definitely trying to be timeless. And then but contrast that with like some of your superhero work. What's the goal when you're writing a superhero comic?
Um, I think you have to, especially when you're working for Marvel, you have to sort of serve two masters to some extent, and that like it needs to fold in neatly with the universe as it exists. Like you want it needs to feel like it's part of the Marvel universe. That's why people come to Marvel comics, because that's they like that world and they want to
Mm,
experience stuff that's going on in that world. And it's nice to do stuff in there because you can just have Spider-Man show up in your comic. You can have,
right.
as in Wasp, you can have Daredevil just pop up and Daredevil's there.
Mm,
It's like, wow, I get to write Daredevil this month because I said he's there.
right.
So like that's a neat thing with it. But you also want to like, my goal is always to do something with the story that I haven't seen done before, that hasn't been done before, that feels different than things that have come before. Because there's a lot of issues of Spider-Man out there.
Yeah.
Um, and if you're gonna make like the shots that you have count, you want to try and do something that isn't the third best version of something Greg Rucka did 20 years ago.
Right.
um, you know, and that, I think like that was our goal with Wasp stuff, especially, was to be able to tell like different types of stories,
Mm,
whether they be like you know science centered stories with girl adventure scientists, or whether they be as in the second volume we had a big story that was had a focus on mental health and disability that like was very important to me. And I think unfortunately comics has a pretty bad relationship, especially superhero comics, with mental health and disability.
yeah. Yeah. So with all of your comics, right? Like whether it's, representing underrepresented communities or telling stories that we don't get to hear, or from perspectives that we don't get to hear, right? That seems to be a theme in your work. What are the things that are important to you to sort of get across in stories?
um I like to have stories, whether I'm telling a superhero story or a kid's story or something like Cold Ever After, which is quite a bit more grown up and adult, to
Mm,
have sort of uh, the same sort of moral code and sensibility to like what my themes are, what I write about. I like to have queer characters. I like to have a variety of diverse characters in the story. I don't like to try and speak for different communities, but to have like, if you're doing a fantasy story, if it's a fantasy world, why can't you have a variety of people in that world?
mm,
You don't have to write a character as being from fantasy China. Like it's, you know,
Right.
you have to, you can include different types of people in there. Um, and so like I always want to have those sort of representations in there, and then sort of like make a deal with the audience to some extent that like they know what to expect from me as far as what you know, not everything's going to be pleasant, but it's not, I'm not going to write the sort of things that would make people who enjoy, you know, my other books uncomfortable to read. You know, there might be, as in Cold Ever After, there's an incredible amount of violence,
Hmm.
but it's not like of a disturbing sexual nature. It's not something where, you know, my uh where heroines have to deal with stuff that like I wouldn't want to read about. I think to some extent that's it for me, is like I don't want to write books that I wouldn't want to read.
Hmm.
And I think everybody to some extent should have that goal in reading stuff, because if it's not something you want to read, then who are you writing it for? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, you know, that's the biggest thing for me, is like I've I've watched a lot of movies and read a lot of books that I'm like, I feel like there's a better version of this.
Hmm.
And my goal is to always sort of like do the better version of that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when we're talking about like sort of reflecting the world around us in a better way. I was just talking to Stephanie Williams a few weeks ago, and we
I
were
love
talking
Stephanie.
about, I do too. But I asked her, like, what kind of drives her in stories. And one of the things she said was, sometimes it's just like, I read a book and it was like, that was cool, but what if there were black people in it? Right. And it's like, because, often in fiction, it's like, we just don't see people who represent or reflect the world around us. Right.
Yeah.
And as you are sort of pulling in a more diverse cast of characters in your writing, to what degree do you feel a responsibility to be um, authentic or bring in other voices as like, I don't know, advisors to speak to the authenticity of the voicing of your characters?
That's very important to me. It's something that I have frequently done, even from the beginning with sort of, you know, friends and relatives.
Mm,
I think it is it's interesting to me that we're seeing sort of this backlash of like a lot of uh, editors and publishers seemingly being afraid of people telling stories with diverse characters if the characters don't look like the person writing it. When
mm,
I think the real issue that a lot of readers have and that they bring forward is not that, you know, white people can't write diverse characters, but that they need to, I mean, white writers need to be willing to put in the amount of research and the amount of time and the amount of listening that they would if, like, I mean, that they already do if they're writing like a World War II story or like a
mm,
story that takes place in, you know, the Victorian era. You would do research about that because those are characters living lives that you're not living. And you
mm,
should be willing to do the same thing for Black people or for people from other countries, for Hispanic people. Like, you should be willing to put in that kind of time and work to get it right. Um, and I think you also need to accept in a lot of things that there are problems you're not going to see because your eyes are not trained to see them.
mm,
Um, and that having somebody who will read for you, whether it's something you do as a, you know, swap, whether you guys work together and you read their stuff, they read your stuff, or whether it's something that is, you know, paid either through you or through your publisher, um, as an authenticity reader, like I think that's important. That's work that needs to be done. Um, and if, you know, it is important, if it is actually important to you to represent different types of people, and it's not just a question of trying to get the money, um,
mm,
then like you will put in the time and care to do it. You know, I think I've got a book coming out with Mad Cave, the Maverick imprint, later this year, that is a queer romance book in which one of the characters is you know, Black and has CP. And I was like, I want to have a disabled character as, you know, a lead in this romance story, but I want it to feel authentic. I want her voice to make sense. I want like the problems that she encounters to be sort of like real.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never had those issues. I've never had serious physical disability, and so like we got Maverick, to their credit, brought on people to read for me. I mean, I had actually a friend of mine who had done the same sort of work with Wasp, because we had a character who had CP in there. So I had asked him to sort of read and give me some pointers on dialogue and stuff like that. He had done that, and then Maverick, because this was a more central thing, brought on two folks to sort of consult on that and then give feedback. And I think it's important to do that, and then to listen when people do give you feedback. So I think that's a point where a lot of people have a hard time, is they ask the questions, but then they don't really listen to the answers.
Yeah. And I think just as a reader, when the voices are inauthentic, that's when it feels like someone was just checking a box,
Yeah.
like, or worse, it feels like parody, right? Like, not to pick on whoever wrote this, right? But I was reading an issue of Miles Morales. This was at least a year and a half ago. And it wasn't even the main story, but there's a backup story in issue 25 of Miles Morales, the last volume. And just the slang just got to be too much, right? And I guess like if it was Peter Parker, or I don't know, insert young white character, it might have just been like a how do you do fellow kids moment.
Yeah.
But like it just felt wrong. Like, okay, either this guy like just hasn't met black people before, or like he was like, all right, I'm just gonna turn on BET for a few days and then I'm gonna write this comic. But it was just like it was borderline offensive. And I think it was well intentioned. I think he was just trying to sound like a kid, but it just kind of fell flat. And I think that's the risk you run when there's not someone to sort of say, "Hey, we don't talk like that," or this isn't what's important about the fade or whatever it is, like whatever cultural sensibilities that we're talking about in the moment. But yeah, I think it's super important to have someone with an ear, or keeping an eye out for different things, um, just so that your dialogue or little things don't get in the way of the story you're trying to tell, because that's the important part.
Yeah. I think that's it's incredibly important. It's valuable in a way that I think people don't always realize. And I think I talked a little bit about the podcast I do, Progressively Horrified. We talk about like progressive politics in movies, and I think I'm eternally frustrated by some of the ways that people like just miss. Just it's like if you just had somebody read this that like felt comfortable giving you feedback, like one or two passes, it could have been good. So we were not too long ago talking about this movie They/Them,
Mm.
which is about a group of kids. It's a horror movie that takes place at a conversion camp, and at one point, like and the camp is supposed to be in Georgia, and at one point the like trans black girl who's there, who's at a rough time of this, is like, okay, I'm gonna lead everybody through the woods out to the road so that we can meet the police there. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think the trans black girl is gonna be real excited about meeting the police in the middle of the Georgia woods. Like
At
they're gonna
all.
want to stay here. Like, that she was this trans black girl in the middle of the woods was very excited about seeing police. And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Right.
I live in North Carolina. I've been to Georgia enough times that like just seeing the police, I mean, that sort of like gut-wrenching feeling of like uh what is it in like um Get Out, like where
Mm-hmm.
he's leaving, and you see the cop car in the distance, like
Mm-hmm.
the difference between people watching that who like are who grew up being taught to like trust the police, and
Mm-hmm.
the black audience that is intended for, is just like it's a gulf, it's a mile
Right.
wide.
Right.
And just having that that sensibility of Jordan Peele behind that, it makes that moment completely different than what it would be in, the average horror movie.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, and it's funny because it's difficult to explain cultural differences, right? And I think, for as much as we're trying to get to a world, well, I don't know if we're trying to get to this, but people are trying to get to a world where it's like, oh, I don't see color. It's like, well, that's cool, but whether you see my color or not, there is a culture behind it, you know. Um, just like, you might be Polish or Irish or, like the food that you eat. Like there's so many different things that are informed by your background. And it's not because you have white skin, but it's because that's how you were raised. And
Yeah.
we've got a lot of the same things, if not all of the same things. So to be able to speak to that authentically in storytelling is super important. Um, and I guess
Yeah.
that's a soapbox we could stay on forever, but I digress.
Yeah. I mean, I would say just as a point where I've had issues with it myself, even
Mm,
like is if you read far enough into Princeless, I think in volume 5 or 6, there's a story where Adrian cuts her hair.
mm,
And I really wanted to take a minute to sort of focus on hair and sort of like the issues she's having with it as compared to her sisters. And it is an incredibly important thing, having been with my wife long enough that she has been through a whole big chop and
hmm
growing her natural hair phase while we've been together. And then seeing that, it was something I was like, I want to take a moment to sort of focus on this for her. And having her read that, and my wife be like, hey, so can we not make it sound like, and I know you're not doing this intentionally, but can we not make it sound like women wanting to straighten their hair is evil? Because it's not. Like,
Right, right.
that's how this is reading right now. And you don't want to accuse the all of the black women out there who still would rather have a wig, who would rather straighten their hair, of doing something nefarious. It's the culture that has messed it up. It's
Right.
not the people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That is nuance that's difficult to capture.
Yeah.
But again, just having more eyes on it certainly helps. So your most recent work, The Cold Ever After, um, I was surprised, honestly, when I started reading it, and I was like, oh, wait, this is a more adult book. What was your goal in setting out to make it?
I think it started out as a pitch of a sort of a genre centered pitch of I wanted to do something that was this weird combination of things I'd never seen, of doing like a noir story set in this sort of Arthurian fantasy setup of this knight who is the champion to this king and queen who is uh she has a very Lancelot like relationship to
Mm,
the king and queen, but is in this case is older. She's in her 40s and or 50s in the story, and she's coming in, and this is a case where she's been exiled for all these years, but she's the only one that the queen trusts to come in and help with this. I
mm,
was like, I've wanted to write a story that had um all the stuff I love about both of those genres, but also had an older queer heroine, which is very rare for comics in general, but for fantasy stuff beyond that. Um, and for it to be sort of it is way angrier than any book that I've
mm.
written before.
Yeah.
Um, that in a lot of ways is a reaction to a lot of horror movies and queer movies that I've watched over the years that will have these sort of horrible things happen to their queer characters, and then be like at the end be like, oh, but I won't take revenge because that'll make me just as bad as you.
Mm,
um, which is just this sort of preaching to queer people about not being as bad as the people who have spent all this time torturing them is something I wanted to sort of do the opposite of with this story. And I wanted to get this sort of angry fantasy story in there that has some aspects of this horror and revenge story, that doesn't tell its characters that, oh, you've been tortured for 20 years, don't react
Right.
to it. And, just give sort of this character who's a victim of not just, this one thing, but also who is, from this island that has been colonized, who has basically been, kidnapped and raised to be a soldier, from being a child. This chance to actually just like express that anger and to do this all her way, and for it to be a thing where like the uh not to spoil anything, but like uh the witches and the queer people in the story like get theirs, and it's not, even if like it does feel a bit evil and malevolent, that like it doesn't view them as the bad guys suddenly.
Mm. And so this book you put it out with Titan, who is no stranger to fantasy, or even, more mature titles. They're doing Conan right now and getting a lot of praise for it. How was it working with Titan again this go around?
I really love Titan. It's an interesting setup because they are British, so it's like sending out emails, getting emails at like 2 in the morning. Um, because you're working across the ocean with them, but they're so good to work with. They're so like wonderful about putting stuff out and doing stuff that's different and original. I'd gotten the chance to work with them a bunch doing the Sea of Thieves comics,
Mm.
and they've always been like great to do stuff with. So this was a nice opportunity to get to do something different and original, sort of play in a completely different space and have a team that was really supportive of that.
Nice, nice. And the art in The Cold After Ever After is by Megan Wong. For those listening, just could you describe the art style or
Yeah, it's Megan's stuff is very colorful.
Mhm.
She had illustrated a one issue story for me in Princeless, and I knew from like her stuff that I was like, I want to do more stuff with her. What I love about her stuff is the art is really dynamic. The fight scenes feel really cool and fluid, and that was the biggest thing I wanted. I think it's interesting because a lot of people, when you hear sort of the premise of the story, expect it to be very like grim and gritty looking,
Mhm.
for all the art to be gray. And I wanted to go a very different direction with that. It's very colorful, lots of like reds and yellows and oranges. And I think Megan's art is incredible. Like the how dynamic her stuff is, I
Mhm.
really really enjoy.
Yeah, no, the art is very bright. I don't know. I feel like we say this a lot about a lot of comics, right? But it just looks like it's just a couple steps away from animation, right? Like, I feel like if they were to make this into a series, I know you know exactly what everything should look like. Um, but like you said, it is very dynamic, right? Like the expressiveness on the faces is amazing. But even like when it like the fight scenes, I think definitely stand out, right? Like we've got like there's like some like manga and animation influence that you can see. But it's really well done. I'm thumbing through it now and it's great. It's like DreamWorks before they went all Pixar, right? Like I'm thinking like The Road to El Dorado and some like Prince of Egypt, stuff like that, like is what this reminds me of.
Yeah, I really wanted to like that first fight scene, especially that's in the bar. Like I wanted to set this mood of her being, she is a noir character. She is, drunk when we meet her, but like even drunk and wearing just like a shorts and a tank top, like
Mhm.
barefoot, she can still kick the ass of a dozen of these knights.
Right.
Uh, you know, barehanded or with whatever's on hand. Um, and that she's got a sort of like she's great at sword fighting. She's great at close range. That there's a little bit of pro wrestling influence in there. She does throw a DDT in there. Um, so it was a lot of fun to like put that together, and I love having a fight scene early in like the introduction to a character so that you
Mm,
can like get a feel for. I think good fight scenes tell you a lot about who, action characters are.
yeah, camera died, but it's all good. Um, but I think about like that Sherlock Holmes movie with Robert Downey Jr. And
Hmm.
it's like when you get his internal monologue and he's just like, all right, hit him at a pressure point and this and that. And it's like, okay, like I know everything I need to know about this dude just from this, this random like cage fight situation. But yeah, no, very cool. This scene to start the almost said movie, but to start the book, like it's the same sort of deal. Like you said, you learn so much about her just watching her fight. Um, so sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say I love that in like good martial arts movies. Like if you've ever seen Ong Bak,
Mm,
like there's this like long early in the movie. There's this long like market chase fight scene that like tells you so much about the characters just in those couple minutes of action. You know so much more about them. In things like Enter the Dragon, you get those early fights that you're like, oh no, like this guy's serious.
right.
That's the guy you got to look out for.
Right. So the Cold After Ever After is out now, right?
Yes, it came out in February, so it's out now.
Awesome. Awesome. So you can grab a copy pretty much anywhere books are sold at this point. I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you to grab it from hivecomiccade.com, since they did hook up this conversation. How'd you get connected there?
I think just I live in Durham, so we
Oh,
bumped
gotcha.
into each other at a lot of events and stuff, and got to know each other, get connected.
Nice. Very cool. Speaking of, what are you doing for Free Comic Book Day?
I have no idea. Nobody's talked to me about Free Comic Book Day yet, so I'm I've been figuring out all the conventions and stuff I'm doing, and then I was like, oh yeah, Free Comic Book Day is a thing that happens. So yeah, I don't know if somebody wants to call me up, as long as they're either close by or will pay for me to get there.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to I'll be at Ultimate Comics Raleigh. But I probably won't be there till closer to the afternoon. But it'll be a good time. I think Potsy's coming. I don't know if anyone else is coming to the Raleigh store. There's a bunch of people going to a bunch of different locations.
Yeah, I usually do either Cary or Durham. Um, I've done the Raleigh one a couple of times, but I used to work over by the Cary one, so I used to do that one all the time.
Got you. Yeah, I used to work over there too. Anyway, well, very cool. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. I'm really excited about it, man.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem at all. Before we go, where can people find you or find your work?
So you can check out my website for just a list of everything that I'm working on. That's just jeremywhittley.com. I'm on Blue Sky at Jeremy Whitley, Tumblr Jeremy Whitley. Twitter, if you're still there, is jrome58. It's the same on Instagram. And then, like I said, my podcast is Progressively Horrified. We put out a new episode every Friday where we, watch a horror movie and talk about it through like progressive standards that it never asked for.
Got you. Well, I'll definitely check that out, and I'll make sure we leave links to all of those things in the show notes and the description of this YouTube video down below. But once again, Jeremy, thanks for your time. And for those of you out there, I don't know what you're doing today after you read or listen to this, but whatever you do, make sure you're reading something dope. Peace.